Hello and welcome to Hebrew Perspectives. So glad you're here to join us today. Um, we're going to be talking about some Torah basics. We're going to give a lot of, you'll hear a lot of Hebrew words. So what we'll do with these words is that we will try to break some of them down for you and some understanding so that you know what we're talking about. Like in our most recent video, on Parashah Teruma, I mentioned that the word Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, also includes the rest. It includes the prophets and the writings such as Psalms and Proverbs and such. And so when we say Torah, we're saying the whole of what everybody calls the Old Testament. And then also Torah means instruction. So you have something very basic. And something that you may not know is that Torah in Jewish thought is God. And this makes a whole lot of sense when it comes down to when we talk about how Yeshua, Jesus, is God manifest in the flesh. But we'll continue on from here. So what we want to do with some of these Torah basics is let's begin with some of the Hebrew the alphabet, or in Hebrew is called the Aleph Bet. Maybe you've heard me, I think in one of my other videos, I sing the Aleph Bet. Aleph Bet Vet Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Chet Tet Yud Chaf Chav Lamed Mem Nun Samek Ayin Pei Fei Tzadi Kuf Resh Shin Sin Taf Ba Ba Da Ba Da. The little part on the end there that the rabbi that taught me that song, and it's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. And the reason why we learn Hebrew is to get back to the source, to get back to the root. Because when we read the Bible in English, there are things that the translators did the best they could with trying to match a word to what the Hebrew thought was trying to bring about. And there are several Hebrew words that there just isn't a very good English translation. So they did the best they could. It's all divine. It's all inspired. We understand all of that. But what we want to learn about here today is, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction about the Aleph Bet, from the Aleph to the Tav. Maybe you've heard me say this before, but the Aleph is the first letter and the Tav is the last letter. For those of you that know Greek and you read in the book of Revelation, talks about I am the Alpha and the Omega. That's the Greek, the beginning letter and the last letter. So he's basically, the master is saying that when he says that, he's saying I am the Aleph and the Tav in Hebrew. And that's very important. It's et. And it's actually a word. It's throughout the Bible. And I've done previous videos talking about this. In the beginning, God created, Bereshit bara Elohim et. In the beginning, God created the. And so that means that in the very first thing that he created was the Aleph Bet. And the Aleph Bet it's unlike any other alphabet. It's not just some haphazard collection of letters. You could say that there's so much to it. You can say it's kind of like a DNA. It's very similar to the chemical language, so to speak. It's got numerical values to them, and they're all divinely inspired. When you break down the letters themselves, say for example, the first letter we're going to talk about, the letter Aleph, that letter is actually made up of other letters. And you'll find that throughout the Hebrew alphabet. And this is some of the amazing things that we're going to learn about this. So in talking about this, in Psalms 145 is a great example of this. It's in alphabetical arrangement. And one of the reasons why it's so significant is that it's known by its first word, Ashrei, or happy. So the sages say that the person that recites Psalms 145 If they do that at least 3 times a day, they're assured a spot in the world to come. Interesting, huh? So when we open our hand, see, it says here in verse number 16 of Psalm 140, it says, you open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. So this is emphasizing God's all-embracing sustenance and the alphabetical arrangement of its verses. Now, Rabbi Bachya says, for further expression of this idea, in the verse that commanded every Jew in the wilderness to gather manna to sustain himself in comfort, though he was surrounded by total desolation, the verse contains every letter of the alphabet, symbolizing the relationship between creation and the continuing sustenance. So this was found in Exodus 16:16. If you go back just a couple of weeks and you watch the video Beshalach, Parasha Beshalach, this is where we were at, talking about this right here. And it says, this is what God has commanded. Gather of it the manna, every man according to his consumption, an omer per person, according to the number of persons, every man for the number of his tent shall you take. So everything that you need is the sustenance. It's from the aleph to the tav. And I've talked about this before. When the Messiah says that he is the truth, I am the way, truth, and life, that word truth in Hebrew is emet, aleph, mem, tav. The beginning letter, the middle letter, and the ending letter. What does that tell us? Is that's from the beginning to the middle and the end, that he is the big picture. He is everything. He is the truth. He is the living word of God. This is why we dig so much into the Hebrew and breaking down into the Hebrew letters so that we have an understanding of who he is and how it affects our lives. So let's go to the letter Aleph and we'll just talk about it a little bit. So Aleph, whenever you see, once I started learning Hebrew and understanding it a little bit, the first letter I started learning about was the Aleph. And so as I began to start reading things in Hebrew, the Aleph stood out to me. It seemed like it was in bold, like it was darker and blacker than the rest of the letters in the print on the page. And was it really? No, but it stood out to me. And that's when you study the Word of God, you're searching for God. And it'll stand out to you, and you'll start to notice things that you've never seen before. And so I understand not everybody has this access, and not everybody understands this, but maybe I'm going a little too deep with some of these basics to begin with. But there's just kind of an understanding of what we're doing here, and where we're coming from, and how we're going about it. So the Aleph symbolizes, every time you see it, it symbolizes the one, the eternal, the only omnipotent, omnipresent God. It's his symbol. It's the symbol of the universe. Its numerical value is 1. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, 1. He is the one. The parts of the letter of the sacred name, of his sacred name, are in there. The Aleph in there. And even the word Aluf, which is the same letters, means master. So you'll hear me talk about Yeshua, Jesus, being the master. The Aleph to the Tav, he's everything. This is to me, this is just amazing, exciting stuff. And I was so glad that someone handed me a Hebrew Bible one day, and I was able to, it gave me a hunger to understand more about who this Jewish Jesus was, who these Jewish disciples were, what in the world they were doing. And so God himself, let's see here. So the Aleph is the first of all the letters, of course, in the alphabet. And it's one letter among many others, but it's the first among its equals. So it is the leader and the master of all other letters. And I do another teaching when you actually look at the beginning. In the beginning, you'll see that the first verse, number 1, Aleph, shows an Aleph, and then the second letter, Beit, is the first letter, Bereshit, that starts in the beginning. Bereshit means in the beginning. And so you have the Aleph and the Bet started out right off in the beginning of the Bible. And so you can see how significant this is. So it has a numerical value of 1. And 1 is, that's our God. When he said, if you've watched the 10 Commandments video, and where the first commandment says, I am the Lord your God, he is saying that I exist outside of you. So he is one and all. He's everything. And that's what that 1 represents. He's unique. He's indivisible. This implies that this is absolute monotheism. There is only one God. That's just all there is to it. There's no debating it. There's only one God, and there's several manifestations. And we kind of hinted in this last parashah that we just did this yesterday, Parashat Teruma, that there's 3 offices that he commonly manifests himself into. And so we perceive God in many roles, many roles. We see, when we're reading the Word of God, we see him as kind, we see him as angry, we see him as merciful, we see him as wise, we see him as judging, and so on. And his names and the letters and all of this stuff reflect that. And that's how we can understand when we read in a certain way, we can see when his name is Elohim, it's judgment. When we see the sacred name, he's being merciful. So this is wonderful. And so this is where we get those attributes of mercy, the 13 attributes of mercy that we're talking about through our discussion of the Tomer Devorah, or the palm tree of Deborah, learning the 13 attributes of mercy. So the Aleph, like I said, it is a different kind of letter. It's actually it's made up of a Vav and 2 Yuds. So it's made up of 2 different letters. And this is common throughout the Hebrew alphabet. And so it's interesting. I've got some other videos. If you go to Hebrew Perspectives, you go and you visit the channel, and you go through and you dig through and looking for videos on the alphabet, I break things down a little bit more, and I do some of the numerology that's involved in it, involving how God is love, and the sacred name, how it all adds up, and the numbers, and it's a great study to go and look at. So God is one. As long as he lives, I'm going to rise up in the morning, and I'm going to say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. I'm going to say that every time. And that's going to be, I'll tell you what, those are going to be the last words on my lips as I'm passing from this world. That's right. That's what it's going to be. So I hope you enjoy this little introduction to the Hebrew alphabet. We're going to be going into more of it, and there's a whole lot just in each individual letter that we could go over. But I just want to give you some basics and just some understanding. So you've learned today a little bit about Torah, what Torah is, what that means. You've learned a little bit about what truth is, Emet. You've learned a little bit about the letter Aleph and what it's made up of, and how it represents God. And we'll go from there. God bless you, and thank you for watching.